All right, so this is the first session of our book club, non-traditional book club, and we are reading Into the Silent Land by Martin Laird, Laird. I'm going to break the rules, and last time we said we're going to read chapters 1 and 2 because I didn't want to have like a million sessions about this, but 1 was a lot and it has a nice clean point. So today we're just going to cover chapter 1, and then next session we'll just cover chapter 2, and we'll make sure to post that for everybody. Um, so I say non-traditional because I don't want it to be like a book club, like, and when we chat after it can be, but for me, I don't want it to be like, oh, in page 7 he said this and it reminded me of that and blah 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 or whatever. Um, for a few reasons. Number one, I just want to be different, do it differently. Number two, like I want it to be for people who like don't even read the book. If you don't want to read the book, you don't have to, and you can still like enjoy these lessons as their own thing, these sessions as their own thing. So what I'm going to do is just kind of like go through the content, right? The topics, whatever, kind of give my own 2 cents. Sometimes when two worlds come together, it helps make more sense for certain people. Um, but I will read like really good quotes from chapter 1. But I'm not going to say like, oh, Laird said whatever. That just is too like it's not very. I want this to be like a contemplative experience in itself. So what I'm going to do is if I pick up my phone like this and I'm reading, that's me reading Laird. And then if not, I'm reading my own notes or whatever. So just know that these are his words when I'm doing this, and these are my words. So I'll read some of him and talk about whatever I think and so forth. And then in the chat, we can talk about however you guys want to do it. It's fine. So yeah, chapter 1, the chapter was titled Parting the Veil, the Illusion of Separation from God. And I'm also going to include in there introduction, God, our homeland. So I'm going to go over these two things, these two sections of the book. So number 1, so we are created and made for silent, relational, non-dual connection and synchronicity with God. Like we've talked about, we're also made for the regular kind of relationship, but you're not here to learn about that. You can learn that at any church. I'm talking about, that's why I use the word silent relational connection. Because that's what we need. And in the same way that, you want to take care of your car, like my car was just in the shop, right? You want to do your oil changes and all that stuff, right? Change your brakes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why do you do that? Because you want your car to keep running. You want it to be in the best condition possible. Well, in the same way, like we are wired, we are made, we are created to connect with God and live in a connection with God in the realm of non-duality or in the realm of the Holy Spirit or of spirit. And so if we're not tapping into that and making that connection, then our car is going to break down. Our car is going to have issues. And our car is our very self. And then our self involves relationships and life. So our very experience of self and life and our psychology and relationships, it's all going to go downhill if we don't get our tune up, get our oil change, get our brakes changed. If we don't connect with God non-dualistically in contemplation, we're going to break down. And so, just like in the last session, if you're tapping into contemplation, keep going. And if you're not, get into it, because I promise you, if you are somebody who wants a relationship with God, this is the best way of doing it. This is what you were created for. And so Laird, that's kind of like his foundation. As creator, God is the ground of who we are. Think about that. The very ground. So we think about the regular ground, how important that is. Imagine life with no ground. You'd just be falling and falling and falling, right? There's no foundation. Well, in the same way, and I don't want to say in the spiritual sense, but really in any sense, in all senses, God is our ground. And so, chapter 1, what's it called? It's called Parting the Veil, the Illusion of Separation from God. And he goes into how, we're already one with God. We're just blind to it. So imagine not seeing the ground. How would that feel if you didn't see the physical ground? Haven't you ever seen people that go on those like bridges, and there's like the surface is like see-through and transparent, and some people can't walk on it. There's funny videos of that, people like freaking out and shaking and stuff, right? It's the same thing. If God is our ground and we're not connected with that ground through contemplation, no wonder we're addicted and we're chasing after these unhealthy things, and we have these like unhealthy dynamics and relationships because we're looking for our ground. We've lost our ground. We didn't really lose our ground, but we don't see it. We see the see-through, we see the transparency, and it freaks us out. And so we get into all these weird habits and dysfunctions and whatever. So that's the issue, is that we're blind to our safety net. We're blind to the foundation that's already here, which is God. And so that's the foundation of all of this, is that God is our homeland. God is our ground. Another word that he uses a few times is the center. God is our center. Um, when life is lived from the center, as John of the Cross terms it, all of life seems shot through with God. And so it's kind of like wearing rose-colored or red-colored glasses. You can see the world, or you can see the world red through the red glasses. You see the world, everything is still there, it's the same, but it's covered in red. Or maybe a better example, and what I'm talking about is when he says that when you live from the center, or when you live from a contemplative place, all of life seems shot through with God. So you know how like when you're and you'll think about your close relationships, when you're in a good mood, what is that like? You see the world differently, and you just like people more. You let things go easier, right? And then when you're in a bad mood, you got a different set of glasses. And what happens? Like the same people annoy you, and you don't want to be around them. What changed? Was it them, or was it you? It was the glasses that you wore. It was your perception. It was your filters. So in the same way, when we live with a contemplative mind, we're wearing a certain kind of pair of glasses where we experience the world in just a better way. And when we don't have a contemplative mind, or a non-dual mind, it's kind of like a bad way. We can go through the same things and experience things in a way that causes us to suffer. But it wasn't the things in themselves that made us happy or made us sad. It was our pair of glasses. So something to think about. He says, we enter the land of silence by the silence of surrender. So how do we get grounded? How do we see the world the right way? Well, it's what he calls the silence of surrender. So when we think of meditation, a lot of people think like, oh, I'm just shutting up. And yeah, you are doing that, but it's not, it's deeper than just not talking in your head or not paying attention to, yourself so much. It's about surrender. It's about humility. It's about letting go, and not surrender in the sense that like I'm a peon and I'm nothing. It's surrender in the sense that somebody really powerful, God, really wants to take care of me, and I can lay down, I can recline, and he's going to carry me around and take care of me, just like you would take care of a little child. That's what the surrender is about. And when we're thinking, and when we're not in a contemplative place, we're like trying to live life by our own bootstraps, and we're not letting God and reality in the universe and people around us love us. And so we want to, it's not about being quiet. Oh, it's not a strict thing like, oh, shut up on the inside, be quiet, meditate. It's, why are you talking? Why are you so absorbed in what you're thinking, your story, how you see things? It's because you haven't surrendered. You're holding on to something. You're holding on to your own story. I mean, think about it. We wonder why, like, what's a practical reason why people, including myself, right, why we deal with like selfishness and self-centeredness. Well, your whole life, what do you live with? Your voice inside your head, your thoughts, your feelings, your stories, your opinions, your judgments, your beliefs. If you don't tune that out, well, no wonder you're selfish. All day you're thinking about you, what I want, what I this, what I. So when we get into contemplation and we get silent and we surrender and stop listening to that, you just effortlessly become a selfless person because you're not listening to yourself. Get out of yourself, and then you're selfless. But if you don't enter the land of silence by the silence of surrender, if you don't surrender on the inside, well, then you're just listening to yourself, and no wonder all you care about is yourself. It's practical. And that's what I love about contemplation. It's really practical. It just makes sense. It's not some weird esoteric thing. People are into a lot of weird stuff and whatever, frequencies and drugs and all this stuff, whatever. But it's like, this is just practical things that we're dealing with. And so the non-surrender portion of ourselves, when we're not silent on the inside, when we're not meditating, when we're not in that place of contemplation, where does that voice come from, and where does your attention and your obsession with that voice come from? It's not just like that you're not doing the right thing. Well, just do it. Just contemplate. It's not just like an action. It comes from a pain deep inside you. It comes from a fear deep inside you, and that's what we're dealing with. Um, the surrender of mental silence is a surrendering of deeply embedded resistance. That's the issue. You have a deeply embedded resistance to relaxing, to letting go and letting be, to trusting God. You may not like to think that because you're this like, oh, I believe God, I trust God, or whatever. But if you can't be quiet on the inside and be in this rested place, you have those deeply embedded resistances. And that brings up a really good understanding of self and of meditation and how this works. Yourself, and I talked about it before in one of these sessions, but yourself is it's you, but it's not you. Like I was saying, it's like an alarm system. It's something in you that is you, but when you experience it, it's kind of like you're experiencing someone else in you. I don't know how else to make sense of that except like that. Like that guy Eckhart Tolle, like he woke up when he realized, he said to himself, "I'm sick of myself," or something like that. And then he's like, "Wait a minute, who's the myself that I'm sick of, and who's the person sick of that self?" So it's one person, but in experience, it kind of is like two people. And that's why Richard Rohr, and he got it from Thomas Merton, he likes to say there's the true self and the false self, or other people say the big self and the little self. So that that person that talks a lot in your head, and that person that like listens to that voice a lot, that's your little self. That is your ego, as they say. And that's the you that has these resistances to love and humility and surrender. And so look at it like a garden. You don't need to like force that self to be quiet or change or become free or realize contemplation or whatever. You just need to do the right things. And Laird goes into that. It's not about changing yourself. It's about putting yourself in a place where change happens. And that's the way that nature is. How does a garden grow, or a plant grow, or a tree grow? Does the tree go, "I gotta grow, I'm gonna make myself grow"? No, if the tree or the plant is in the right conditions, sunshine, water, good soil, growth happens by itself. It's the same thing with contemplation. It's not about forcing something to happen, because that's not surrender, but okay. It's about putting yourself in the right conditions, good soil, rain, and sunshine, and then things will happen. When you contemplate, growth will be natural. You don't need to force it. And the second part of this surrender, excuse me, a surrendering of deeply embedded resistances that allows the sacred within gradually to reveal itself as a simple, fundamental fact. And so that's what we're doing in meditation, is we're not making something happen. We're not, going to God or bringing God to us. God's already here. We're taking off the covers. It's like if you have a lamp and you have all the lampshade and blankets and all this stuff. You can kind of see a little bit of light, a little bit of illumination, but the more covers you take off, what was already there starts to shine, or like a clogged faucet. Take away what's clogging the pipe, and the water that's flowing flows out. The issue is not to get more of God. The issue is to get less of you. And I'm not going to show you and turn around, but this hoodie that I'm wearing, the back of it says, "The more you get, the less you are." That's exactly what this is. What do we have that we lose God? Well, the sense of separation from God itself. Oh, the sense of separation from God is itself pasted up out of a mass of thoughts and feelings. So your separation from God, what's covering the light is just a mass of thoughts and feelings, and your obsession with your own thoughts and feelings. It's that simple. It's that practical. When the mind comes into its own stillness and enters the silent land, the sense of separation goes. Union is seen to be the fundamental reality, and separateness is seen to be a highly filtered mental perception. It's this simple. It's like if you have beautiful music playing and you want to hear the beautiful music, but you also have like heavy hardcore metal music or whatever, punk music. The good music, the beautiful music that you want to hear is there, because I know to some people hardcore music is beautiful, but bear with my point. You just got to lower the music you don't want to hear, and the music you want to hear is already playing. You don't need to get closer to God. You just need to change the channel. You need to lower your volume because he's already talking. But just like in that Old Testament scripture with the prophet guy, I don't even remember who it was, but he was like, "Oh, there was an earthquake and there was a thunderstorm and there was this and that, and God wasn't there. Where was God? In the still small voice." So we have this, not just a still small voice, we have this subtle interior connection and union with God. But again, he's our ground, but we don't see the ground. We're blind to the ground. And what's blinding us is the constant occurrence of my thoughts, my feelings, my stories, my opinions, my judgments, my interpretation. And not only is that playing, but we're listening to it over and over and over. And we want that to be quiet, and we want to not listen to it. And then we're going to realize the God that's already there. So the skill required is interior silence, mental silence, silence on the inside. When the mind is chattering and your attention is hooked to the chatter, you've changed the channel on God and put on non-God. It's just as if God was next to you, because he is next to you and with you, and he's just like whispering sweet nothings in your ear, but you got your headphones on and you're listening to something else. It's that simple. That's what meditation is. That's what contemplation is. And it's so simple, but the cool thing is we can talk about it in so many ways that it never gets boring. But in terms of practice, it's not hard, it's not difficult. That's all that we're trying to do. The illusion of separation is generated by the mind. That's so good. And is sustained by the riveting of our attention to the interior soap opera, the constant chatter of the cocktail party going on in our heads. So that was his really nice way of saying what I just said. So the job or the work or the practice of contemplation, it really is this simple. There are two contemplative practices of fundamental importance in the Christian tradition: the practice of stillness or quietness. That's all he means. Think about it. If your mind is talking, your mind is not being still. Look at thinking and hearing audio in your head is the audio version of movement. So silence is the audio version of stillness. Okay. The practice of stillness, also called meditation, still prayer, contemplative prayer, etc. So that's number one. And the practice of watchfulness or awareness. So I really want to make this so simple for you so you can practice this. It's not complicated. So if you remember anything, remember this. Meditation is just two things. Whenever you want to meditate, whether you're doing it formally at your house or throughout your day as you live your life, you're doing two things. Number one, on the inside, you're resting that voice. You're resting that interior turbulence. Sometimes it's not a voice in your head. Sometimes it's an emotion. It's like a physical feeling for your soul. You feel upset. You feel agitated. You can rest that, believe it or not. And I kind of feel led to go into this quick story. I remember at one of the worst times in my life, and I had like a lot of like emotional internal agitation. And I won't go into specifics, but it was so bad that, and I was so hooked on that soap opera in my mind, right, and zoning out the reality of God, that like I had this like deep pain. And I talked about it before, but one of the best things that I learned about meditation was that meditation is just to rest that interior turbulence. So when I got that revelation, when I felt that thing in me, oh, I need this or I need that, it needs to happen now. I just rested that part of me because again, it feels like something in you, but I knew it was me, even though it felt like something in me was doing that. And every time I would feel this deeply embedded resistance in me to what is, because in this example, I was resisting what is, and I wanted something else to happen now. I wanted this to happen now. So for you, maybe you want a substance, you want a person, you want some sort of acceptance, professional or relational or whatever, right? There's something in you. You don't see the ground of God that's with you, and so you're holding on for. You're trying to find ground, and so that resistance in you is agitated. That's your mind agitated. And you just need to rest that part of you, and you can do it. And from a teacher that I really respect, he says some people, this message just get it, and some need some other practices, which we can talk about later. But some of you that are hearing me, you can do this, and it's speaking to you. And I'm telling you, whether it's a voice in your head or whether it's a feeling in your heart, you can stop that. You can stop that. A very famous Buddhist monk named Thich Nhat Hanh, he says meditation is real simple. It's 4 words, and the first 2 words are stop and rest. Stopping, resting. Stop that person on the inside who's agitated. You can, nope, letting that go. And then he gets back up. Nope, letting that go. Oh, she gets back up. Oh, nope, letting that go. I did that like one time every minute. You have a sense of relief, and then that deeply embedded resistance within you, your ego would get back up. No, and I just kept letting it go, letting it go, letting it go. And that's why it's not just resting on the inside or stillness or silence. It's also what he says, watchfulness or awareness. Because if you're not aware of what's going on the inside of you, you're going to be unconscious and doing all of that ego stuff. And so you got to be aware. The early desert fathers called it watchfulness. They called it vigilance because they knew if I'm not aware of what's going on in my heart, if I'm not paying attention, my heart is liable with all of these deeply embedded resistances within me. My heart is liable to go and do all kinds of crazy stuff and get so obsessed in its own stories and things like that. And so you've got to be aware, not only because life itself is beautiful and you want to be aware, but that's part of it. But you got to be aware because when you catch yourself going off the handle, you can stop that. You can rest that part of you. So we're being still and we're being aware. That's meditation. And the cool thing is, and he gets into this, we're not just turning off noise. We're realizing that we were never the noise. And when we get to that place in our meditation, the noise stops on its own. So in my example, how I told you how like my soul would get agitated, that's the noise, and I would stop it, and it would get agitated, and I would choose to stop it. I've grown. I'm not perfect yet by any means, but you grow to a place where you realize, oh, that's not even me doing that. And again, it's you, but I mean the deeper you, the God you, the non-dual you. That's not who I really am. That's not even there. That the noise, I'm not the noise. And when you realize you're not the noise, when you realize you're not the voice in your head, because you're way deeper than that, you're way beyond that, you're way bigger than that. I'm bigger than the confines of my form that you see, physically and interiorly. So when in meditation you realize I'm not that, and when you realize you're not that, it becomes a lot. By itself, you meditate by yourself effortlessly. You just shut up, you know. Um, One need not have journeyed too far into the silent land to realize that the so-called psychological self, our personality, not what Paul is talking about as hidden with Christ and God. That's in Colossians. Our personality, let me start over. One need not have journeyed too far into the silent land to realize that the so-called psychological self, our personality, is a cognitive construct pasted up out of thoughts and feelings. What you think of as yourself is a cognitive, mental construct pasted up out of thoughts and feelings. A rather elaborate job has been done of it, and it is singularly useful. But our deepest identity, in which thoughts and feelings appear like patterns of weather on Mount Zion, Psalm 125, remains forever immersed in the silence of God. Let me read that again. Our deepest identity remains forever immersed in the silence of God. Amazing. So we've talked about the non-dual side to ourselves, what he just called the self that's forever immersed in the silence of God. And in Colossians, he's referencing when Paul says your true self is hidden with Christ in God. Who you really are, you can't see it. Just like, remember how we've been talking about, you can't see who God really is because he's just way beyond any boxes. Well, you're made in the image of God. So who you really are can't be seen as well. Who you really are is hidden with Christ. Okay? So we've talked about the non-dual side to ourselves, the non-dual side to God, and to reality itself. We notice this non-dualness not in thinking or in theory, but in actual practice. The first step is for someone like me or someone else to tell you who you really are. And something in you have a moment when you're like, whoa, this is who I am. That's great. That's awesome. I'm bigger than my frame. I'm bigger than my form. But the second step is to actually meditate, is to actually be quiet on the inside, rest on the inside, and be present with that resting. And then as you do that, you're going to have moments when you realize for yourself through experience that you are non-dual, that you are infinite, that you are transcendent, that you are something that causes yourself to wonder. You wonder at yourself in the sense of, wow, whoa, but also like, what am I? I wonder, right? So the best example, or not the best example, but my best example is like someone who knows all about like a lion. Oh, a lion is the king of the jungle. A lion has this much force and it can tear up an animal or a human of this size and whatever. Lions are ferocious, and that's good to know. Like, it's good to know, like, okay, lion, stay away from lion, right? That's step number one. But step number two, or the experience, the second part, the experience, because that's one kind of experience. Okay, I didn't know about lions. Now I know about lions, and lions can hurt me. But when you actually are in the jungle or wherever you are, and you actually encounter a lion, and he's looking at you, and he roars, and he's just in all his majesty, and all, and you're scared. Okay, that's when you really experience the lion, and you're just like, no, I've seen a lion. I know. There's a difference between that person who's seen the lion in the flesh, and the other person who knows about the lion. And the first guy is still better than the guy who doesn't know about the lion. But there's a second step. So in the same way, we talk a lot about all these things, non-duality and meditation and the wonder of God, and it's fun. I'm enjoying it, and I enjoy hearing it from other people. But don't you actually want to like see the lion for yourself? Don't you actually want to experience the roar of the lion? Don't you actually want to experience non-duality? Don't you actually want to experience who you really are? Don't you actually want to experience the fabric of reality? You got to practice. You got to do what we're talking about, and you got to do it all the time. And it's not a work, it's not hard, it's not effort, it's not all of these things. It's surrender. It's the opposite of effort. And when you live life this way, and guess what? You're going to mess up and forget about it and go, that's fine, but get started. And then you come to this group and you'll be reminded again, or whatever, or get a buddy or whatever to remind you, whatever. This is, we need our oil changes. We need our tune-ups. We need our car to get, turboed up and fixed and whatever. Like, we need contemplation to be our best selves, 100%. And then we're going to see God. We're going to be aware of the ground that's always here. And when we're aware of the ground that's always here, life's going to be great. We're going to be dancing on the ground and running around or whatever. But if we don't see the ground, we're scared. That's why we get attached to things. We're holding on because if I let go, there's no ground. But there is a ground. God is the ground. God is your ground. God is your home. God is your center. You just don't see it. And you can say, oh, I know that I see it. I believe this stuff. It's so whatever. Okay, that's good. You're the first guy. But get to be the second guy. Get to be the guy who sees the lion, and you do that through contemplation. You do that through meditation. And so we've talked about it before, but What is it like to see God? What is it like to see the being of God that's everywhere, in everything, all the time? When our life in God washes onto the shores of perception, we see no image or shape, no holy pictures or statues, nothing for thinking minds comprehending grip. We know undeniably, like the back of our hand, the silent resounding of a great and flowing vastness that is the core of all. Words cannot express it. 2 Corinthians 12:4. No tongue has sullied it. Such is the impenetrable silence in which we are immersed. Yet this silence cleanses the mind and unbinds the tongue. Psalms 56, verse 7 and 8. I will sing your praise. Awake, my soul. Awake, lyre and harp. I will awake the dawn. You ever see a sunset yourself, like on a really nice view, right? That's different from seeing the sunset, in the city or whatever, right? You got to see it for yourself. You got to see God for yourself. You got to have to see who you really are for yourself. Because God is everywhere, but we are blind to it. I'm still blind to it. If I wasn't blind to it, I'd be a way different person. But it's okay for me to accept the journey that I'm on. That's why it's a journey of faith, because maybe I'm not where I want to be in my clarity, in the glasses that I want to wear. But it's okay because I know God's still with me. I know God's still here. I think in one of our other lessons we talked about, it was Gregory of Nyssa who says that, we are to, God is unknowable, but we are to know he is present. We are to believe he is present. So that's the beauty of this. Even on all the steps that I take to see better and better and better, I'm already here. So I have faith, and I know that I'm already here. And that very faith is part of what cleanses my lens. The Buddhists have a pretty good metaphor for this, or image for this. They talk about how if we're trying to get to the top of the mountain, well, you're doing two things at one time. Number one, remember, you are already at the top of the mountain. You're just trying to realize it. But sometimes we can do certain things like contemplation or go to these groups or whatever that help us get to the top of the mountain faster. And so which is it? Do I just realize I'm at the top, or do I do things to help me realize? You do both. You do both. I promise you're already there. And that, if you remind yourself of that whenever you feel down or scared or whatever, it's a big help. It really, really is, just to remember everything's complete. Everything's finished. Jesus really did it all. Jesus really did do it all. And that's the beauty of Jesus, is that we can look at another human being and go, oh, he's good. He's at the right hand of the Father, free of sickness, sin, and death, and all whatever, right? Okay. Humanity has hope. It's going to be okay. I'm at the top of the mountain already in him. But I don't have to have this like intellectual ascent and be like, okay, well, I'm at the top, so whatever. And then I'm still like a jerk every day. If you're still acting like a jerk, you haven't realized enough that you're there, that you're Christ. That's just the truth. So then you still do things that help you ascend. But again, you know that you're not really ascending. So it's both. It's not either or, it's both. So, and you will have moments when you just kind of go, woo, right? Or you awaken to the top and you have a couple days where you're like, oh my God. And then for whatever reason, those covers covered the lamp up again. But we don't got to worry about that. If we just keep doing what we're doing, we keep resting, we keep being aware, we keep contemplating, the veil will continually be unveiled. The covers will continually come off, and you will live in awareness of who you really are. And it's awesome. So next week, we're going to cover chapter 2, which is called The Wild Hawk of the Mind. So that's pretty exciting. That's page 19, and we'll go from there. So thank you for being here, and I can only pray that you take on this journey of contemplation, because I know it's going to change your life and make you who you always wanted to be. So have a good one. Thank you.